Hi, I am the co-founder of CrowdSurf,
director of events,
bass player,
video producer,
digital director,
songwriter,
manager of touring,
director of content and operations,
and you're listening to the Springboard
Music Podcast.
Lauren Hungate is a songwriter that I cannot wait for you to hear from. Lauren and I became friends when we both were employees at Capital CMG, and her story is quite unique. When she graduated college at Lee University, she started working in music management and then transferred over to the label side where I met her. She's from Franklin, Tennessee, but surprisingly didn't fall in love with music as a kid. She liked it, but she never really gave songwriting a thought until college and quickly realized she's pretty good at it. Now, Lauren is signed with Concord and Chromatic Music Publishing. She's had cuts with Elle King, Chrissy Metz, Carter Faith, Lily Rose. She's written with Little Big Town, Charles Kelly, Jake Owen, Maddie and Tay, Lori McKenna. There's a really good chance if you like country music, you have heard some of Lauren's words. Take a listen. I would love for you to share a little bit about growing up in Nashville, because you are a Franklin native, which is what we call a unicorn. Did you grow up like admiring singers, performers? Did you do theater? Like, what was your upbringing in Nashville like?
Yeah, so my it is so weird because you would think, okay, Franklin, Nashville, you're probably around music all the time. Like it's the country music. It's where people come for country music. It's where everyone is. No, like my family, it's very strange. My dad played golf professionally. My mom is sporty. She works in the medical field. My brother, he went to college he was a Division I wrestler. So we were very like, my parents were very like, okay, everyone's sporty. Let's try to put you in every kind of sport. And Rachel knows me, and I know this is a podcast, so you can't see me. There's not a single like sporty thread in my body. And my parents, like, because they weren't in music, we weren't around a lot of music. We didn't, we would go to concerts at Bridgestone, like the big arena downtown, every once in a while, but my parents weren't like huge music lovers, so it just wasn't something I was really exposed to. When I was in 8th grade, you had to, the school I went to, I went to public school, but you had to do like a fine arts, and it was like, you could do theater, you could do choir, at my school, you could do guitar or a piano class. And so I took one semester of guitar and I took one semester of piano. And I remember just being like, oh, I like this. I enjoy this. Like, I want to do this when I get home. And so my parents were really supportive. They put me in piano lessons pretty immediately when I was in, middle school / my early high school. And yeah, I just kind of fell in love with it. There wasn't like I didn't know what to do with it. And it was just more like, I didn't know about songwriting. I didn't know about singing. So it was just, I like playing piano. So, I played piano for my church and played block chords and played Snow Patrol covers when I got home.
The best kind of covers.
Yeah. But I wasn't really exposed to a lot of music.
When you discovered piano and you were like, okay, I love this. It's almost like you found your flow, like you found your lane. Did they relent on the sport talk, or were you kind of balancing both?
My parents, they're so supportive. They were just like, we want you to do what you like doing. They had no idea anything about it. They did it. It wasn't like with my brother, because he was involved. He was really sporty. And so they kind of knew how to encourage it, or they knew like, okay, well, this is bad form. I can help you in this. I can, whatever. They knew the rules. Like they knew, if you do this, you get this many points and blah, 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 blah. With music, they didn't know. It wasn't like they were like, oh yeah, like you should be practicing sight reading, or you should be practicing blood. They didn't know anything about it, which I kind of liked, but they were, because they didn't know anything about it, they were always excited about it, like a little bit fascinated by it.
That's amazing.
And they were super supportive. Like they were never like, it wasn't like the classic like movie, like, you know,
Black
High School
Sheep.
Musical. Yeah, High School
Yeah.
Musical, where it's like, Troy, you shouldn't be pursuing the arts. You should be doing basketball. Like they've always been really, really supportive.
When did you realize, oh, I can like put words to this or like create my own melodies?
Not until I was 24.
Really?
It's like funny because, you know, you look back now, and I'm sure you even do now. You look back at like your younger self and you're like, oh, this should have been a sign of like, this is what I was interested in. I wrote a lot of poetry when I was in middle school and high school, but it wasn't something that I ever was doing really aggressively, because it was like, when you're in high school, like writing poetry isn't cool.
Right.
And I listened to a lot of like, the music I was interested in was like, I should have known. I've always, and it's not that I'm I wouldn't say I'm definitely an anxious person, but I wouldn't say I'm a super depressive person, but I was always really interested in lyric heavy songs. Like I loved Tonight I Want to Cry by Keith Urban and Whiskey Lullaby. And I loved, you know, Regina Spektor and Ingrid Michaelson and Death Cab for Cutie and Coldplay and Snow Patrol and Taylor Swift's first album. And, you know, I really was into that type of music, like singer-songwriter kind of music. But I didn't really know you could write. I didn't really think of like songwriting as a separate entity. I just always associated it if you want people to hear your music, you are an artist. That's kind of what I associated. I think like even while working in the business, it took me a while to realize like, oh, these are separate. These can be like separate things. They don't have to be one. You don't have to be an artist to write songs, and you don't have to be, I don't know, like it took a while for that to click for me.
Did you ever consider pursuing being an artist?
I did for about 2 seconds. When I went to college, when I was in college, you had to do like a kind of like a senior project, and I took a songwriting class when I was in college, but the college I went to, it was like it just still wasn't really taught that they were separate entities. So I wrote 5 songs when I was 21 for my college class. And
was that your first time like writing a melody?
First time ever. Yeah. Like first time writing anything
Wow.
to do with music. So I wrote 5 songs, and they're, as you can imagine, it wasn't like I wrote 50 songs and like picked the best 5 to record. It was like I wrote 5 songs, recorded these 5 songs, and yeah, they're all like 6 minutes long, and like
6 minutes? You really went all in.
They're all like really long, and like you listen to them. I listen to them now and I'm like, oh. But yeah, I wrote those 5 songs and like did them for my class / I wrote like I ended up releasing them because I had spent so much money on them. Like
Yeah.
I was like, I want to get them done. I want to get them recorded right. And so I came back to Nashville to record them. I had they were Christian songs, but I had like a country producer do them. So they're just very confusing.
I remember seeing this project when we worked together.
Yes, they're like just very confusing sonically, because it makes sense. Like they're Christian songs, but like they sound like country songs. They're just confusing, but
which is very
was,
in these days.
It is now, but like
you're ahead of the time, Lauren.
Yeah, but the way I did them wasn't correct. It doesn't have like the smartness of like country music. It's just like country sounding, like Christian music with like pedal steel. It's confusing. But But yeah, I put out these 5 songs, and that was kind of the end of it. I was like, okay, I don't like the performance piece of it. And so I was like, okay, so I guess that's it. I guess I don't want to be an artist. Again, I still didn't know that songwriting was an option until I was 24. And so that was kind of the end of it for 3-4 years.
What did you go to college initially for to then have to
Yeah.
do this recording for a project?
So I went to college. I started with a vocal performance degree. I really didn't know I knew I wanted to do music. I didn't know what I wanted to do in music. Started with vocal performance, and then I switched to church music because I was like, well, I like to sing, I like to play piano, maybe I want to be a worship pastor. And then I got a job in a church, and I was like, nope, I don't want to be a worship pastor. And so I switched to music business, and you had music electives, and one of the music electives was songwriting. At the end, my school was like, God bless the Univeristy, but just a little bit behind on the times. They didn't really know commercial music. And so I did a senior thesis, and for your senior, you had to do a senior jury, and you either had to do a recital or you could submit recorded songs. And I was not about to get up there and sing a German aria. And so I submitted the recorded songs as a part of my senior thesis. So that was it's very boring, but that was the whole reason I did the project, was to get out of having to perform in front of people, which is another sign you probably don't want to be an artist.
Probably don't want to be an artist. Why not Belmont, which is another Tennessee school for music, or, go big and go to Berkeley? Why
Right.
Lee?
Lee is for poor people.
It's affordable.
It's affordable. I didn't want to do Belmont. It was too close to where home. I wanted to be a couple hours away from my family, from my parents. I wanted that independence. I was just such a late bloomer to all of it. It was it's the strangest thing, because I grew up in a town where I should have been early. I should have been ahead of the curve, but I was just really I didn't know anything. I had a friend who had gone, a friend who in my church who had gone to Lee. And that was kind of I went and toured the campus, and I was like, oh, this is great. And they have a music program, and it's a perfect distance away from my family. That was kind of the whole reason. It was just kind of and it's cheap. It was just kind of okay, well, I guess this will be good. I don't know.
Well, and a lot of good things came from it. So
it's
good
great.
decision.
Yeah.
Looking back, do you think, knowing that now you are a songwriter professionally, do you need to go to college to do that? What were the pros and cons? Was there anything beneficial that you took from that experience that helps you now as a songwriter?
I do not think you need to go to college to be a songwriter. I'll say that first. I think I'm really grateful for my college experience, because I found my husband, and I think I needed a college degree to trickle down into where I am now. I don't know if I would be doing it I won't say that. I feel whatever you're supposed to do, you always find a way to it. But I think I wouldn't have been as sure this is what I want to do if I hadn't had that period in school. I think there's certain schools, Berkeley, Belmont, that really tee you up for it. There's so many people. The typical Nashville journey for songwriters is usually a Berkeley or a Belmont. It's mostly Belmont, where you go to college, you study songwriting. They have a whole degree for songwriting. You learn how to do it properly. You learn how to co-write. They hook you up with great internships and mentorships and opportunities to meet with publishers and things like that maybe other colleges wouldn't. But I think it's just any creative thing. It's you need to go to school for, if you want to be a painter. It just depends. It depends on what you're trying, on what tools you're trying to sharpen and where you are. It's yes and no. I would never say don't go to college, but like, do you need it? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, and everybody's different, right? Like for
Yeah.
you didn't know what your path was. You just knew
No.
music. So I think in a way, like it did set you up to try multiple things in music. When you left college, you went back to Nashville, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
you went to Red Light and did
Yeah.
management.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like, and what did you take from that experience that helped you with where you are now?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, it's swapped. It's like they'll try doing something in the creative field. They'll try, a lot of people in the music business were artists at one point or songwriters or producers. And then they're like, yeah, and like I just didn't really love it, or it kind of died out. And so I switched to the music business. Mine was kind of reverse. I started in the music business and I gradually got into the creative field, became a songwriter. Red Light, I honestly will credit Red Light to I think Red Light taught me more about being a songwriter than college, than any other job I had, even probably more than my first year of writing.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of jobs, and you know this, Rachel, like you worked in the business for a while. It is a lot of ask for forgiveness, not permission, and figure it out. And
Yes.
I think like if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a producer, if you want to be a songwriter, the biggest thing you're going to have to learn is figure it out. There's not a perfect roadmap. There's not a blueprint of like, if you do A, B, and C, it'll equal this. It's more so like trial by error, and you you just kind of have to figure it out on your own. I don't think you can really look to someone else to be like, how did you do it? You can look to other people and be like, okay, I can take so and so's journey and like do this. But I think like each person, it's kind of their own road of figuring it out. And Red Light was completely that. It was, there's no instruction. It's just, you're thrown in feet first into the deep end, and you either can swim or you can choose to sink. And, yeah, it was just really intense, really fast, straight out of college. And so I learned how to work really hard. I learned how to take rejection and how to get in trouble. And I learned a lot about music. I learned a lot about the behind the scenes that I didn't know, that I didn't learn in school. And my boss, she, you know, I respected her and I feared her at the same time, but it was really amazing. I worked for this woman named Mary Hilliard, and it was really amazing to watch her. She would have ideas, like she would be like, I want to do like a festival, and she would just create a festival out of thin air. And so like that was kind of, I think a lot of us sit around and wait for like doors to open instead of creating the doors ourselves. And she was someone that I was like, okay, she's doing it her own way. Like she's not waiting for someone else to do it for her and her to hop on someone else's train. She is starting the train herself. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Red Light, and I fell in love with country songwriting at Red Light because I was around it all the time.
That's incredible. Just so many things that you said I resonate with, we don't wait for the train to start. We start the train ourselves. We don't wait for the doors to open. We create the doors. And I think that's a big lesson and perspective that you took from Red Light to then give you the courage to take the leap to do songwriting full time. You're like, you know what? This is what I want to do. I'll figure it out.
I had someone very early on when I started writing. I had a meeting with a publisher, and I was working at Capital Christian, and I was like, I'm very confused. I was like, I have a great job. I make a great salary. I have health benefits, but like, I really want to do this other thing. And I'm struggling with like trying to talk myself out of it when I know this is what I want to do. And he was like, if time and money were no option, would you do this for free for the rest of your life? And I was like, I would. And he's like, that's a good sign that you should do it. You would do it for free forever. It's probably what you should be doing.
Wow. So you went to Red Light straight out of college, and then were you there a year?
So I was at Red Light for 2 years
2 years.
before switching. So I loved Red Light. But it was like, there was something, and I know you and I have talked about this, like most creative people before, like you have this kind of, okay, this is a good job, but I know this is not it. I know this is like not forever. And at the time I didn't know it was songwriting. I was like, well, maybe it's just not management. Like maybe I don't want to work in management. And so, I prayed and just kind of was like sending out feelers of like, there are other jobs, maybe I'd be interested. And out of the blue, kind of, I got a job offer from Capital Christian. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to take this as like a sign that it's time to move over. And so I left Red Light and I started at Capital. And my poor bosses at Capital, very shortly after I started at Capital, I started songwriting.
What was the like beginning step of, I'm gonna pick up my guitar or go to the piano and just write? Like, what was the catalyst for that beginning?
When I started, there were 2 people who worked in A&R, and I'm sure you remember P.D. Martin, Carrie Carpinen. Carrie, I think, still works.
Them both.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're both they both worked on the A&R team, and they both were songwriters before and during. Like they kind of did it on the side when they worked at Capitol. And I remember like having lunch with both of them in like that weird little like corner of the office. And I was like, man, I just think that's so cool that you guys like work in the business, plus you have something creative that you do outside of the business. And they were like, well, you could do it too. And I was like, okay. And so I like remember going home one day after work and sitting down at the piano and like trying to write a song. And I wrote a song, and then I came back the next day and I wrote another song, and I came back the next day and I wrote another song, and it was like, well, damn it.
You just liked it.
It was just like, oh, I just liked it. And it was like this weird thing where there was like this creative kind of like light switch that I felt like was flipped on, in the sense of like, oh, I really like this. It's just like these stages of trying to talk myself out of it, trying to talk myself into it, and being really
cool.
confused.
You have that written down though, and you can watch the process.
Yeah, it's a lot of like, it is very like a new relationship where there's a lot of like romanticizing, and then there's anger, and then there's confusion, and like probably about, and this was also, I was like, God, I'm very confused. I'm trusting God in my gut, and like, if this is a thing, I need like a couple signs. I'm very big of like,
yes, I am too.
Yeah, I'm like, I need a sign. And probably like 3 weeks into me trying to do it, me being like, okay, well, do I want to be a songwriter? I got a call from a friend of mine, a girl I went to college with, who at the time she was doing The Voice. She was on like The Voice, like the show, and it was still going, like she was still on it when she called, and she was like, hey, this is so random, but I remember the Christian album you made when you were in college, and I'm trying to write songs, and they're trying to get me to co-write, and like, I remember you wrote those songs. Is there any way you'd want to have a management deal? Like they'll like, would you come out to California and write songs with me? And I was like,
what?
Yeah, it's very like, it's that. Here's the thing. That was like a very, all the rest was the trenches. So this was like a, this was my sign before like a year of the trenches. And so I went out to California, and I was there for 3 days, and we wrote 4 songs that are terrible. She would tell you they're terrible too, but it was my
and you
first
had never
like
co-written before, right?
No, I had never co-written. And so yeah, I went out to California and I wrote songs with her, and they're just really not very good at all. But
did any of them make it on the show?
No, they were very bad. There was one that was like less bad than the others, and she had it like demoed out. And that was like my first demo I had, was like this song. It's called Young Love, and it's so bad.
Did you leave feeling like you had let her down? Like, what gave you the wind
No.
beneath your sails?
At the time, I thought these songs were great. So when you're beginning, like, it's like, yeah, when you start running, the first time you run a 7-minute mile, that's really good. And then in 3 years, when you're running 5-minute miles, it makes that 7-minute mile not look as good. But at the time, it's really good. It's a good time for you. So it's similar to that, where like, I had never co-written. So to me, I was like, okay, there's one song that's better than the rest of these. I'm going to focus on this one song. And, you know, you just keep building off of that. It's like, you can learn something. You learn, okay, well, that's, you know, this song has better structure than the other songs, or this song has a better concept than the other songs. This song has a better melody. And it's just kind of like, still where I am. It's like, you're always trying to beat your songs. You're always trying to like write a better song than you did the day before. Always, like forever.
So you left California with what you thought were great songs.
I left California, and it wasn't even like I was super passionate about the songs, but I left California being like, okay, I co-wrote, I got that out of the way. Like, I got my first time out of the way. Okay, like, let's try to do this at home. And
wow.
So I just started, like, I was, you know, it is that thing where nobody can tell you how to get started. It's just kind of like, you figure out how to get started. And for me, getting started was, okay, I'm going to go on Instagram. I'm going to go, like, I like distinctly remember, and this is like cringy, but whatever, like looking up hashtag Nashville songwriter.
Yeah.
And like going on someone's page and like messaging and being, you know, like going through and being like, oh, well, I like that song. Oh, that girl has a good voice. And me like DMing like 100 people and being like, hi, my name's Lauren Hungate. Like, I'm a songwriter. Like, is there any way you'd ever be down for co-writing? And then I started going to writers rounds, and I'd go to these writers rounds, which are a huge resource. This is honestly like, anytime anyone asks, how do you even start? Go to a writers round. They're usually 3 or 4 people, any writers round, and find the best person in the writers round and ask them to write with you. And that's what I started doing. I started going to writers rounds, and I'd find like the one person that I thought was good, was better, and I'd ask them to co-write. And the worst thing you're going to hear is you're not going to get a response. No one's going to be like, no, I don't know. It's usually like, hey, like, it's usually either no response or like, let me like check my calendar, and then you don't hear back. But most of the time people are like, sure. So I just started writing.
Did you ever feel like imposter syndrome?
Oh,
like you were older, you were further into like a career?
Oh, yeah. I had a husband. Like, a lot of these people were 18, 19 years old, and I'm 25. Like,
yeah. So
hey,
how did you combat that? How are you just like, you know what? Were you just like, I like it. I am getting opportunities. I'm just going to do it.
I think it's like, you get to the point where I was like, if this is what I'm supposed to do, who cares?
Yeah.
Like,
there's nothing to lose.
There's nothing to lose. Like, I think you also have to find, like, Shane I honestly leaned into a lot of like, okay, Shane McAnally was 34 before he had a song, a hit. Liz Rose was 36 before she started writing songs. You know, Brooks and Dunn were 36 and 37 before they even met each other. I think like you have to, for me, I couldn't lean on like, I'm not 18 anymore. I think I had to be like, okay, everyone has their starting time, and like, this is just my starting time. And good songs are good songs, no matter what. I think also like it's one thing, you know, it's hard being a girl songwriter, female artist in general, but like, in this instance, I think it really helped because if you're a 65-year-old dude and you're asking an 18-year-old girl to come over and co-write, it does,
Yeah.
it looks a little bit different than like a 25-year-old married woman writing with you.
Yeah.
So I started kind of like pinpointing, like almost started A&Ring for myself of like, okay, let me find some artists that I think are good. And yeah, I just started writing with artists that I was like, okay, well, maybe this one will be something. And I always tell people to diversify their funds
So
because
financial of you.
I know, because it is like you can really get into you can really box yourself in if you invest in one thing where you're like, okay, I think this thing's really good. I'm only going to write with this one person. I was more like, okay, I'm going to write with these 8 people that I think are really good. And then if 1 takes off, great. If 2 take off, even better. If 7 take off, even better. But I think it's important to not put all your eggs in one basket, no matter how much you believe. Like, I do think it's important you have things you believe in, but if you can have multiple avenues of things you believe in.
What made you think, okay, I need to write with more than just songwriters. I need to write with artists. Why that differentiation? Like, why was that a
Yeah.
goal for you?
Well, for me, it was like, I know I just want to be a songwriter. To have this and to sustain this and to make a career and to have leverage walking into publishing meetings, I need to have cuts. And I need to have cuts with people that publishers are interested in, that record labels are interested in. For people to hear my songs without me cold emailing them, they have to be cut. Like, that's how I kind of wanted, at least like how I imagined my trajectory was like, okay, I would love to get enough cuts that people are seeing my name enough on songs that they like to get me meetings with publishers. And two, like, I wanted people to hear the songs, and I knew if I was just writing with, me and another independent songwriter, it's going to be really hard
Yeah.
for people to hear those songs.
Right.
So it was just me trying to be strategic. Like, okay, let me find some artists I really believe in and buckle down with them and hopefully get some songs cut and hopefully get some ears perked.
So did you go to independent artists? How did you find these artists
Yeah.
and how did you get them to say yes?
Yeah. So, honestly, like independent artists that I was like, honestly, like if you can find an artist that you believe in, that's new to town, that, you're like, man, this is special. They have a really great voice, but maybe the songs aren't there. That was kind of like what I was looking for. But I also was looking for like people I wanted to be around in life too. Like, I wanted to build relationships with artists that were more than kind of just the music. I was like, I want to be someone's mouthpiece and I want to be, like I want to be friends too.
Yeah.
Like I want it to go both ways. Like I want to find artists that I believe in, but I also want to find artists that believe in me. I think like if you can find people that you're like, I would be friends with them even if they weren't music, it's really special because you're going to end up writing better songs because you've done life together. You know what they would say and what they wouldn't say. You know their love life, their family dynamic. And so I was looking kind of for that. Like, there's always going to be artists that you write with where you're like, okay, we're just coworkers.
Yeah.
But I think like my favorite songs have come from writing with my friends.
So at what point were you like, okay, I've written with the songwriters, I've written with the artists, I love this.
Mm-hmm.
I have to resign from my corporate job.
Day job. Yeah. A year?
Okay.
A year and a half. I think about a year I was like, okay, I'm going to leave my job. Like, I think it was more so like planning. I want to respect the company I'm at. And I also like, I want to have a plan before leaving. But it got to the point where it was like 2 full-time jobs. I was working during the day, and then from 6 p.m. to 10, I was writing. I was writing every night, or going to a writer's round, and I was writing on the weekends, and it just wasn't sustainable. And I was like, okay, I have to give something up, and I'm not going to give up the writing. And so I started writing September of 2018. I quit my job August of 2019 and I switched to part-time at Capital for a couple months after that. So yeah, there was a couple months where I did like 10 hours a week because I didn't want, I was like, hey, when I gave my 2 weeks, I was like, I don't want you guys to feel pressure to fill the spot, like to be desperate when you fill the spot. So I'm like, if you want me to work part-time, I can do that. Whatever makes sense. So I worked part-time for a couple months, and then I got a part-time job, which was, very humbling, going from working 40 hours a week and making a salary to, okay, well, I'm working part-time again to work around. I'm an independent songwriter now. Like,
what was your part-time job?
So I worked for a nonprofit. I had so many part-time jobs.
Wow.
I worked for a nonprofit part-time. I sold furniture part-time. I worked for like a song company part-time where you write like songs for events, like people's birthdays.
What?
I helped people with I did distribution for a couple small companies part-time. So I had a bunch. I had a bunch of like little jobs. But yeah, it's, I think that's another thing. If like you're willing to because it's a weird time where if you're switching from something full-time to something where you don't know, that doesn't have a guarantee. Because it wasn't like I left my job to be signed somewhere. It was like, I'm leaving my job to go be an independent songwriter.
Yeah.
to make $0 writing songs. And I'm not sure if I'll ever have a publishing deal, or if anyone's going to cut my songs, or if I'm going to be successful at this. But if you love it so much that you're willing to take that, I think it's a good sign that you're probably doing what you're supposed to.
In the next episode, we walk through what exactly a publishing deal is and if every artist should pursue one. Lauren also shares with us how entering into a writing contest actually landed her a publishing deal. Thank you so much for listening to the Springboard Music Podcast. If there's a specific position in the music industry that you're interested in learning more about, reach out to us at Springboard Music on Instagram.